So, Mark, bottom line it. If Nick Reiner pleads not guilty by reason of insanity, does the jury buy it?
Oh, I think they not only buy it, I think it's probably closer to the truth than anything else in this case.
Welcome to the Two Angry Men podcast. So, Mark, we have a documentary that just dropped on Hulu, and it's about Nick Reiner, and it's about the Reiner murders. And we know that Nick Reiner is fully aware that he killed his parents, but he thinks that the reason he's in jail is some conspiracy against him. This is how delusional he is right now. And all of this traces back to something we found out about his mental illness. And then it gives rise to what could eventually become his defense to murder, which is not guilty by reason of insanity. So let me tell you what we know.
Wait, can we also talk about the fact that you and I vehemently disagree? But go on. How's that?
I don't think we do.
Okay.
I don't think we do. I think both of us agree that right now he's incompetent to stand trial, right?
Okay. Yes, we have come full circle. Right now.
No.
Because on our previous episodes, we've argued about this. And if Alan had stayed on, I think he would have declared a doubt. In fact, I know he would have declared a doubt.
Well, he wouldn't have. Nick Reiner is not ready to stand trial. He is incompetent to stand trial. There's no doubt about it. And it just.
By the way, the public defender never would have continued this case for 6 weeks, absent the fact that one close encounter, reveals this guy is not competent almost as a matter of law.
Yeah, he's not. What's a close encounter?
Yeah.
What's a close?
Meaning one. What all you got to do is go into the lockup in Department 30 where he is.
What happened?
And you can see that. I mean,
what happened?
The encounter was in the lockup in Department 30, and it was apparent he's not competent. I've been there, done that.
Yeah, like I said, he is under this delusion that this is a conspiracy that has him in a jail. He doesn't understand that. So we'll get into it in a minute. But let me just tell you what we found out. So.
Right.
You know, he went to rehab 18 times, and there are a lot of issues about whether these rehab facilities handled him properly. These 30-day programs where they pay a fortune, you're in and you're out, didn't work. But he had
drive-through rehab, as I like to call it.
So around 2020. He was diagnosed with a very serious mental illness. It's called schizoaffective disorder. And it has schizophrenia-like symptoms, including hallucinations, delusions, also severe mood disorders, including mania and severe depression. So doctors put him on meds for this disease, this schizoaffective disorder.
And the point was 2020.
Around 2020. So for 5 years, he's been on meds. When we're leading up to what ended up happening on December 13th, he was doing fine on the meds. He was fine. And I mean, I don't want to say fine because he had all sorts of problems, but the meds were keeping the schizoaffective disorder in check. A month or so before the murders, the doctors changed the meds, and it sent him on a spiral. Rob and Michelle saw it. They saw him getting dangerous and erratic. They talked to people about it. They did not know what to do about it, but these meds were off, and he was spiraling out of control to a point where he literally broke with reality. And then you have December 13th when he slaughtered his parents. This wasn't just a stabbing. It was carnage. And we now know, I got to tell you, we worked for a week to find out why the meds were changed. And we were asking people who we were using as sources in the documentary, and they wouldn't tell us. They said, you're just going to be stunned when you hear why. And we couldn't find out. They wouldn't tell us. And we just found out why the doctors changed the meds.
Yeah, and it's
weight gain. It's weight gain that he was complaining that he had gained weight. So the doctors accommodated him by changing the meds which literally created a spiral into this tragedy. And
by
that's
the way, which is not, it's I know people hear this and it blows their mind. I cannot tell you how many times that with either schizophrenia or the affective disorder, any of the related, there's subcategories underneath, where the complaint always is, it slowed me down. I feel like I'm in a gray area. I feel like I'm in a fog.
Yep.
Weight gain is one of the things I've heard, especially
sexual
now, given
dysfunction and weight gain.
Exactly.
Those are the two things. And it was weight gain. And, look, it's going to be for others to decide, was this really bad judgment to change his meds when he was doing okay? That's for another day. But let's talk about, look, right now you and I both agree he's clearly not competent to stand trial.
There is no way in his present state.
Right.
And this is not for those say, you're a defense lawyer, you're hearing this from the defense. No, I'm telling you, he is and was or has been in Twin Towers. Twin Towers has got sections, if you will, modules, if you will, of to where they put people. Basically, they do triage there in the jail. And where he was a recognition beyond almost any doubt by sheriff's personnel that this is somebody who is completely untethered.
Yep. And that's my recon too. But I also know that the meds still aren't right, that they have not stabilized him in any way. But eventually they're going to figure that out and they're going to stabilize him. And eventually he will become competent. Not today, not next week, but eventually. So let's
By the way, whoever your sources are, only because they confirm everything that I've heard as well, are spot on. And let me just make one prediction, because maybe this is where we disagree. The Twin Towers, which is where he's housed, which is LA County Jail,
right,
they do and I'm not one to always compliment law enforcement, but I will tell you that they do a yeoman-like job with something that should not be their primary duty, which is dealing with mental health and people who are in the throes of mental health. The problem is that they are not equipped like Atascadero, which is one of the lockdown mental health facilities. I'm not so sure that what unfolds here isn't that at some point a judge at 95, Department 95, which is the mental health court, which is where he will be referred to when the PD enters a doubt as to his competency to litigate all of that. If he gets sent to Atascadero, I agree with you. He is going to get, at some point, they're going to figure it out. They're going to get him. They're going to get that competency back. But the endless cycle that we're going to be on is every time he gets returned to LA County Jail, he's going to disintegrate again. And we're going to be in this endless cycle for years and years. That's where you and I probably disagree.
Listen, you may be right, but let's just, for now, make an assumption. At some point, he may be competent to stand trial. If and when that happens, I know when Alan Jackson went before the microphones after he withdrew, he said, let me make this clear. Nick Reiner is not guilty, and you can print that. And what he's talking about is not guilty by reason of insanity. And in the documentary, we spend a lot of time talking about this plea. He can't just, if he pleads not guilty, it's ridiculous because he did it. He talks about doing it. He knows he did it. There is a mountain of evidence showing he did it. So the DA is not going to plea bargain this case. The way he came out hot and said this jury is going to find him guilty of first-degree murder unanimously, you know as well as I do that Nathan Hochman is not going to plea bargain this. So it's going to go.
No, he's never going to plea bargain. By the way, he also assigned, and you saw at the press conference, right to his left, right as we're viewing it, was Habib Balian, who was assigned to this case.
So
that's actually who will be in the court. And you're right about that as well, that If it was a not guilty, this would be one of the quickest deliberations
Yeah,
of all time.
for sure. So it's going to be not guilty by reason of insanity. So I've spent a lot of time in the last 2 weeks looking at this defense. And I got to tell you, there's a case that we found in Canada, and this is in the documentary, which by the way is on Hulu right now. And in
Which,
this,
by the way, I took a look at. I'm not blowing smoke, but it's well worth the time if you're interested in this case.
thank you. So we found
And
this.
shout out to Anakin, who tells me he was kind of the shepherding arm and behind it. So
What?
shout out, yeah. Anakin told me that
My
he
assistant
put this
said
all
that?
together. Your assistant basically put it together.
Can
and
you
get
guys
to
get
take off.
Anakin to
You
come
take
into the room
victory
here,
lap.
please? We need Anakin for a minute, okay? We'll get into that. So not guilty by reason of insanity. There is a case in Canada involving a guy named David Carmichael. David Carmichael took his 11-year-old son to a hotel room and strangled him to death. Put him on the bed, kissed his lips, watched television for 6 hours, and then called the police and said, I just killed my son. And he knew what he had done was legally wrong. He felt it was morally wrong that he had to do that to save him, and that he knew he was going to go to prison for the rest of his life. He had been on an antipsychotic drug like Nick Reiner, and they had a 3-day trial. And in the end, the judge, the prosecutor, and obviously David Carmichael all agreed that he was out of his head when he did this. And they found him not guilty by reason of insanity. He spent a year in a mental institution, then outpatient. He is now back with his family. They have forgiven him because they understand what happened. That's a hard pill to swallow. But that case seems to align with the Nick Reiner case, based on the various components. What I'm saying is that defense could work.
Oh, I have no doubt that the defense could work. And if you want to know the truth, it probably aligns very neatly with the facts in this case. And I know that is hard for a lot of people to stomach.
Yeah.
But there's a lot going on here. And I don't know how much we want to talk about it, but what you just talked about Alan forcefully at that press conference saying he was not guilty. And he didn't say not guilty by reason of insanity, because
Right.
I don't think, I think at that point on the way out the door that the valor was the better part of discretion. However, you will also know that Alan seemed incredibly frustrated or angry. And I've known Alan for many, many years. And I saw that press conference, and he was very, very fired up, angry, in my opinion. And
I think he wanted the case because he actually, I believe, believes in this defense.
I think that's exactly right. I don't think there's any doubt that he was not only wanted the case, but had already bonded and was invested in the case. The way he talked about the client, the way he was obviously angry that he could not proceed. And I'm knowing Alan, and like I said, I've known him for a long time. It would be hard for me to believe that in the time period from when he continued the arraignment to when he withdrew on, or the court allowed him to withdraw on January 7th, I would bet you that he was working 24/7 with the finest experts in the world, psychiatric experts in the world, and that he was constructing and delving into and exploring the defense, to your point, of an NGI, and not guilty by reason of insanity.
And so, that then leads us to the public defender, that a public defender has been appointed. I don't think a public defender is going to be long for the case. I think they're going to bring in another lawyer because, listen, public defenders are really good, but what they don't have are resources. And if you have a case like this and you're going to plead not guilty by reason of insanity, NGI, then you have to call a battery of experts. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars. PD's office doesn't have the resources.
Well, this is what normally would happen. The PD's office, and I often extol their virtues. I think it's the most thankless yet probably vital job in the criminal justice system, more so than prosecutors. Nobody's writing thank yous or cheering for the public defender. The public defender, as I said, it's a thankless job, but it's the most important job in the system to make the system work. They have a unique experience in Department 95 where a lot of the battles are going to be fought in this case. And there's going to be a lot of court-appointed experts, not just by the public defender, but by the DA's office. So somebody like Habib Balian is going to be going to the court and asking for court appointments off of a panel list, what's called a 987 list of court-appointed vetted experts who can evaluate and interview and render an opinion to the LA Superior Court judge who's going to be making the decision on competency and later on NGI.
Well, the judge is not going to decide NGI. It's going to be a jury.
The judge will decide certain aspects, number one, of competency. The judge will have to be the one who decides, is he competent?
Right.
Do I let him right now enter a plea, or do I say, no, this case is going to be handled?
I agree with you. What I'm saying is once he's deemed competent, he can plead guilty, not guilty by reason of insanity, and that's a jury question.
Correct. But in the interim, as one of the way stations, so to speak, is the prosecutor is going to ask that experts be appointed and experts examine Nick Reiner.
To determine competency.
Well, not just competency. They get to, once you put at issue the not guilty, the NGI, prosecutors got a whole litany of things that they can ask. They get to engage with the defendant. Well, they get to engage with Nick Reiner
let me stop
prior to ever getting to a jury.
So let me stop you. If somebody has a Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination, how does a prosecutor have any right to talk to the defendant?
They have an absolute right, as determined by California law, within certain parameters, within certain contours, of being able to engage, having their experts engage
having the
with
experts,
Nick Reiner.
Having the experts evaluate Nick Reiner.
Correct.
They will have no contact with Nick Reiner, no direct contact.
Well, I would not be surprised if you see prosecutors having a role in the evaluation. I would not surprise me in the least. That'll be some of the skirmishes that we will see as coming attraction.
I mean, at a point that becomes self-incrimination or the right against.
Correct. Because, by the way, not guilty by reason of insanity is to at some point understand what it is. I may have done this act, but I did this act under the influence, so to speak, of this mental disease or defect or this condition that I was in. Or, the other interesting aspect of this is you and I talked, 3 episodes ago about this idea of voluntary intoxication.
Right.
What we're talking about here and what you've done kind of yeoman's work with, or actually Anakin has on the documentary.
Anakin, come over here now. He's here. We're going to stop right now. Dude, we're going to stop right here. Anakin, come over here.
Anakin, Anakin, just remember, I do employment litigation, so remember that.
Yeah, well, Anakin's not going to sue. So, Anakin, Mark is saying that you have done yeoman's work in putting this documentary together. So what exactly did you tell Mark about how you framed this documentary?
Anakin, how are you? And I'm sorry, Anakin, I feel bad that I put you in this position. I was just trying to let you take a victory lap on this because Harvey gives you no love.
Is that right? Who got a free hamburger?
I got a free hamburger today. That's true.
Yes,
I got a free hamburger. He's giving me breakfast.
Who gave you breakfast?
He takes really good care of me.
Okay. So how did Mark reach the conclusion that you shepherded the documentary?
Oh, I think he just, he invented it.
Oh my God. That's okay, Anakin. Whatever it takes to kind of mollify.
And by the way, I'm not saying
Harvey.
me. I'm saying there's a whole team. We have, a lot of people. We have a lot of people who worked on this documentary.
Anakin worked more than his usual banker's hours on this.
Usual bankers are there.
I love Anakin. And Anakin knows it. So See, this is a good example of your bullshit, Mark.
Oh my God, Harvey. I was going to say it's a perfect example. Exhibit A, Anakin, when you want to leave in the action I'll bring against Harvey.
Oh, is that right?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I already got a good lawyer, Harvey. I hope you're,
Yes,
Yeah, you do already have a good lawyer.
strive
You don't
to.
want to lose him for that guy. Okay. Go back and produce another documentary.
Yeah, good. Anakin, get back to cleaning up Harvey's messes, would you?
Okay. Anyway. So does this defense fly?
I think that he has a documented condition that is more than 5 years old. I think that was one of they have long struggled with this and categorizing it, so to speak. But the change in medication has some history in jurisprudence at being used. And there are other examples of other cases. People who are watching this will see it in the comments, will remind people who are watching this that there are other cases where a change in medication, it may be voluntarily ingested, but it's an unknowing and it reduces the character of the voluntariness because it's the medication change that was not calibrated correctly or was not assessed after the fact correctly. That could be the kind of the kickstarter in this chain of causation, of this horrible chain of causation.
So there is a common misconception about not guilty by reason of insanity. People think in order to prove that to a jury, you have to show that the defendant did not know the difference between right and wrong. That is a way of proving it, but it's not the only way of proving it. That somebody can know the difference between right and wrong, but if they don't understand the character and quality of what they've done, that in itself could lead to a verdict of not guilty by reason of insanity. I'll give you an example. David Carmichael, the guy that I just mentioned who strangled his son, he knew that it was legally wrong to strangle his son. He told me this. He knew it was wrong. He thought morally it was the right thing to do. He also called the police because he knew it was wrong and felt he was going to go to prison because he knew it was wrong. Yet he was found not guilty by reason of insanity because the antipsychotic meds that he was taking had put him in a state where he could not evaluate the quality and character of what he had done. So people who think, oh no, Nick knew it was wrong because he fled to a hotel and the murder weapon, we're told, has not yet been found, so he must have hidden the knife somewhere, and that shows he knew. That doesn't mean the defense is not available.
It's brilliant the way you just framed it, because you also captured, whether knowingly or unknowingly, the insidious nature of what is happening. Part of the reason that Alan Jackson is not there any longer, I believe, is because of the insidious nature of this hold that this mental illness has on him. You have somebody who can seemingly understand when you're having a conversation with them. You have somebody that seemingly is processing what you're telling them. Talk to anybody, any doctor, any healthcare professional, any family member of somebody who's undergoing this, and ask them, have you ever experienced that where in the moment you think they understand what is happening and literally seconds later they're back right to that delusional state? You, as somebody who thinks you know them, a brother, a sister, a father, a parent, and you think you're making that connection, or, I remember my friend Drew saying that with his patients, he used to have a wing person, so to speak, because he would get drawn into it as well. I've seen it with clients where you get drawn into this, where you think they understand it, where you think they're comprehending. But what ends up happening is they are processing it in a world that just isn't, that you're not in, and you think you are, and you're getting drawn into it, but they don't process the same way. They completely believe where they are, and that's the insidious nature of this disease.
So there's another element to this, which I just find kind of interesting: money. that this is going to cost, with a private lawyer, a lot of money. And then the question is, where is the money coming from? So Rob and Michelle Reiner left a fortune. And my understanding is the kids are largely beneficiaries of this. I'm also told that Nick Reiner has a trust. I do not know the level of access he has to the money in the trust, but I would assume, given his history of addiction and mental illness, there are restrictions on that money in terms of it becoming available to him. So, there
also right there hit on one of the common misconceptions here. People will talk about, okay, he committed this act. He cannot inherit the money while he's accused of this or if he's convicted. That is what, when you're talking about, and you did this nicely, Harvey, and I just wanted to point this out, that the beneficiaries, that's separate and apart from a trust that was set up in real time before death that has him as the beneficiary. And if it's irrevocable, and I don't do a whole lot of trust work, but to your point, if it was set up in such a way, and I've had this, and I won't mention the names, but with very prominent people in similar situations where they've got a history of either mental illness, drugs, or the combination, there are strict limits that are generally put under these trusts where there is somebody who is administering it, who is doling out the money, who will make the decisions. And there may be restrictions on what they can do it for, but that's a whole separate issue from inheritance and benefiting from your act.
So, yeah, and that's absolutely true. So my sources are telling me essentially that the family has the capacity to pay for his legal defense. And I have reason to believe that's true. And then separately is this trust that Nick has. And again, I don't know the specifics, but I would assume there are many guardrails on this trust given his history. So there are two paths to paying a lawyer. One is through the family, and the other is possibly through Nick's trust, although I don't know how much is in there, nor do I know what the levels of restrictions are. But you would think that if there is a trust for Nick, that it would be a substantial amount of money, because especially given his condition and the fact that the Reiners never gave up on him and wanted to protect him, that they would provide for him basically for the rest of his life in that trust. So you would think there is a substantial amount of money in there. Don't you agree?
Well, and you guess what? To your point about the public defender, one of the tools in an LA Superior Court judge's toolbox is at some point to assess costs against a so-called indigent defendant. First of all, the public defender, we now have somebody who has seemingly been appointed. The public defender has a duty to go through and do a financial analysis of their client to see if their client truly qualifies for the public defender. All of this is done privately and is not open to the public. But if there is a trust that he has access to, the public defender may not be able to represent him because of the assets that he has. He may get court-appointed counsel or private counsel. And at that point, if the county is on the hook, number one, the county's got the ability to assess the costs against him. And especially if he has assets that he can draw on, they can get compensated. Or if he regains competency to a point where he makes a demand and goes through the protocol of his separate trust, he could demand that he gets a defense.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I think this is theoretical because I believe, based on our sources here, that a private lawyer is going to be hired soon. And I also believe there is a more than reasonable chance that the private lawyer is going to be paid for by the Reiner family.
That's interesting. That's interesting on a number of levels. And do you have reason to believe that there was some reason that's not Alan?
I've heard a lot, and I've heard conflicting things about how that all went down, but I believe that there is an appetite to help him because their parents tried to help him. And if the kids, when they're processing all the grief they're going through and everything, because it is complicated to say, we'll support somebody who slaughtered our parents. And this was a slaughter. This was not just stabbing somebody. It was butchering. And, they're going to have to deal with this. And who knows how that shakes out. But yeah, I believe that at least as of now, that there is a more than reasonable chance that it would be the family that's going to actually end up paying for this. And again, I want to make this so clear, and I think it should be obvious. Not because they're saying what he did was right, it's horrific. It's that he wasn't in his right mind.
Look, and part of the analysis of this, or just kind of the at Monday morning quarterbacking, is remember, and having done these cases more times than I want to even think about, the cross currents of emotion are so turbulent. The idea that you've lost your parents and that your sibling is charged with that, and that you have to kind of reconcile that. I did a hearing within the last week in California where I had to put on the sister to testify for her brother who was charged with the murder of her mother. And we could barely get through her testimony.
And this is both parents at once.
Yeah, this is both parents at once. So just imagine, I mean, the emotion, the conflict, the conflict, the kind of turbulence it's almost beyond anything you can comprehend.
It is. And Mark, also that it's not like the way they feel today is the way they're going to feel in 3 days, that it undulates, feelings from anger to grief to empathy to rage. You
just hit on the part when I said, and I've abused the word insidious all along, that's the kind of gravamen of this mental health disease. It sucks you in, and then you've got your brother, and you've got your parents, and you've got this idea that you love all of them, and you just can't believe that they did it's so much easier to compartmentalize when it's almost a stranger than it is when it's somebody who you grew up with, who you love dearly. It's just almost beyond emotional comprehension.
No, it's terrible. And, it's not just this. It's that, they've been dealing with this for years. I mean, this family has privately been dealing with just horrific circumstances, over just a period of years with this kid who, was being treated for drug abuse. At a point, it seems medical professionals ignored the underlying mental disease. And then once he got the mental disease, he wasn't taking illegal drugs, we're told. He was taking prescription drugs and abusing some of them. And when he's going to rehab, he's going in and out on these 30-day programs that have swimming pools and views and all this other stuff. And the Reiners are paying $70,000, $75,000 a month, and it's doing nothing. And so this family had to go through all of that. And, it's heartbreaking, and it's also not unusual for the mental health system in America and families that have to deal with this.
That's exactly right. And by the way, it cuts across every economic, ethnic strata. I mean, take from the highest echelon to the lowest of the low in terms of, I just don't know very many people who are fortunate enough not to have a mental illness or mental disease of a close relative of theirs. I mean, it's so pervasive. It's such a entrenched part of life in the U.S. It's amazing.
It's terrible. Okay, my friend, we will talk next week.
Thank you. Thanks, Harvey.